This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we are going to review Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 6, Lost in Translation. But before we do that, we are going to cover the news. There are just a couple of topics this week, but they're both big ones. So let's start with the actor strike. And what we now know, which is a little bit more, about what they're trying to work out for conventions, as well as sort of how we think this is going to impact things in the future.
There's an article up on the site, some of which, and we have even a little bit more information. The obvious stuff is definitely no live action shooting. That would even include things like, for Discovery doing ADR. If they have to do ADR on season 5, they can't do that. That shows you the detail, and for even the other shows, because I was going through the rules, like let's say for the Academy show or Section 31, actors are not allowed to audition, nor are their agents aren't even allowed to negotiate.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same like the writers for the writer's strike. They can't make deals or talk about any negotiations or potential projects either.
Nor can their agents. So they can't. Basically, there's no casting happening. So you could, let's say you were at that stage on one of these other shows, can't do that either. So, set design and something. There's things that can be done, but basically, I don't think anything's going to get shot this year for live action unless some miracle happens and the strike resolves early.
Which doesn't look likely at this point since nobody's talking.
The thing that we didn't know last week, or we weren't sure of, but now we are sure, animation, both writing and acting, is not covered by the strikes, so voice work can continue, although we think for the most part, Prodigy Season 2 voice work is done anyway.
Yeah, I think they're just posting everything. They're in that phase.
Yeah, they have such a long, because the voice work's the first thing you do. Well, not the first thing. You start with the writing, but after the writing, you do the voice.
First you do the voice work, then you do the writing. No.
And then you do the animation. So they were writing season 5 of Lower Decks. If they wanted to do voice work they could just keep on working on season 5 of Lower Decks, basically. So that's not going to be impacted by that.
I have a question that I hope you know the answer to. So how about when you have someone like, let's say, Jack Quaid, who's in SAG and is doing this and is on Lower Decks?
But for that work, that project it's all about, is this project struck or not?
Right.
And because
struck work is the phrase.
Yeah. So these animated shows are not struck work, even if you were in a union on other struck work. So Jack Quaid can work on Lower Decks, but he can't work on The Boys, because Boys is struck work.
Right.
Lower Decks is not. And
this is sort of more an opinion question, but if he decides to promote Lower Decks, is SAG going to be pissed even though he's legally allowed to?
I mean,
not legally, but you know what I mean. Like, because a lot of the actors, as they're sort of negotiating whether they're going to show up at conventions, and some of the rules are a little unclear, just basically want to make sure that they don't get their guild mad at them.
I don't know. And I think there is a little bit of solidarity stuff. The more complicated stuff has to do with promotion. So let's start talking about Comic-Con and Vegas, starting with Comic-Con. So we now know what the plan is. Paramount is moving forward with their big Hall H panel on Saturday. You're getting this podcast on Friday.
They've come up with a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, so they're still going forward with a kind of 3-pronged thing where they're going to promote Discovery, Lower Decks, and Strange New Worlds. But because they have no celebrities coming or writers, they've announced no names. Usually at this point, they would have told us who's coming, but there are no names. They're going to show the Lower Deck Strange New Worlds crossover to the whole crowd in Hall H.
Which is going to be so much fun. You're going to be there, right?
Yes, with Christine. So that's exciting.
Yeah, you guys are going to have a blast.
Yeah, because we're going to see it with literally thousands of people.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been to Hall H, but it is huge.
Never.
Even though there's no celebrities for Discovery for any of the 3 shows, I still expect them to roll out news for all the shows. So they're going to do something for Discovery, probably a trailer or some key art or an announcement of some sort, like this actor's in season. I guess it's already shot. For Lower Decks, I would be shocked if they did not announce a release date and a teaser poster, if not also a trailer.
Yeah, I would think so too.
For Strange New Worlds, I don't know. There's not much else to do but show the episode, but maybe they'll say something. You can't talk about season 3 because that's a big question mark. So
yeah.
So watch out for spoilers on the internet on Saturday.
Yep.
There's a bunch more Comic-Con stuff, though, beyond that big panel. We've got articles on the site. There is one other interesting panel, which we don't have a lot of details on, but it's an animation panel. I'm guessing they're going to announce something related to Star Trek animation, but we don't know for sure.
So something new.
Something. I don't know what.
Right.
And, there's some other, the IDW has a big Star Trek panel, so maybe they're going to announce some new comic books. And then there's just a lot of fun, good panels. Check it, Shatner's got a panel, Altman's got a panel. There's a lot of good Star Trek stuff happening that just isn't from Paramount and CBS, but It's worth checking out. And we'll be reporting on as much of that as we can. And there's some good merchandise rollouts and stuff like that. And they're doing what the booth sounds really cool. I can't wait to see the booth. There's some, interactive Strange New Worlds booth. I think parts of the bridge are going to be there or something.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And they're giving away Star Trek things. And, so just because they're not bringing Anson Mount, they are putting a big promotion into, there's a huge Star Trek wrap around advertisement above the Marriott, which is the big hotel next to the convention center. And Michelle Yeoh's on it. So it seems like they're leaning into that.
Interesting.
So I'm heading to Comic-Con tomorrow. I can't wait.
So should we talk about how the strike might affect the 57-year mission in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, that and just kind of generic fan conventions. So if you're going to Motor City Con or, Dragon Con or, any convention, but yeah, that's certainly a big one. These are, so conventions that are not associated with the studios directly.
Right.
SAG has said, that's fine. You can go to those. You're not really there on behalf of these, shows. So they're treating it differently than Comic-Con, which is essentially a promotion event for those kinds of things.
But there's still some guidelines and rules that they have to follow. And I think there's going to be more information next week because I think they're still working out some of this. Because so far what we know is yes, they can go. They can't promote new current shows.
Fine. Right. That's reasonable.
Fine. They can't bring pictures of themselves as their characters to sign. But if you bring a picture of them as their character, they can sign it.
The loophole there is, so if you're in Vegas, there's probably going to be a table selling those pictures.
I would think some smart person would set that up. In fact, I'm going to set it up myself.
So you buy the picture, then you carry it over to the celebrity and they sign it. So problem solved.
But then the big question, which seems a little foggy still, is about the older, the legacy shows, which, the phrase they keep using that we brought up is struck work.
Right.
So, yes, Strange New Worlds is struck work. All of those shows are struck work. Original series seems obvious, no, it was completely different. It was different negotiations. It was different everything. How about when you get into the 90s? What happens when you're talking Next Generation and that whole set? And it feels to me like they haven't really addressed that yet.
Right, because there's, right now the exceptions that SAG has been working hard on are things like truly independent movies that aren't associated with the AMPTP companies.
Right.
So if you're making an indie movie that isn't for Warner Brothers or Paramount or all the biggies, they're handing out waivers for stuff like that. this is so down in the weeds of, yes, we worked on a show for a company that technically doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
If is has been absorbed into what is currently called Paramount Global, which is a struck company, but these are not struck projects because these projects shut down 30 years ago. So
Right.
I it's insane to me if the rule is going to be, I get you can't promote Strange New Worlds Discovery, the new shows, but if Garrett Wang can't talk about what it was like on, in 1997 playing Ensign Kim, what is he going to talk about for an hour? I mean, nothing against Garrett, but it
No,
just,
we
and
love Garrett. I'd love to talk to Garrett for an hour.
you know what I mean?
I do. I do. It's what do you do when you have all these people and they can't talk about the thing that has drawn all of
and
us
it
to
doesn't
that
help the
place?
strike. The big thing about the strike is cutting off the promotion for the streaming services. Yes, these shows are on the streaming service, but it's just, I don't know, like, it's not going to help or hurt Paramount Global if these actors can talk about these shows, but it's certainly going to help a lot of these actors who rely on convention income.
Yeah.
And so we haven't seen big exits from it. There's been a couple. The most significant one is Kate Mulgrew has canceled.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's because she probably felt like she needed to cancel.
The irony is that she's on Prodigy and she can talk about that.
Well, so that's what I'm guessing. I'm speaking completely from my own head about this, but my guess is that she knew she could and probably didn't feel right about it herself.
Oh, I
She's
see
been
what
a
you're
member
saying.
of the Guild of SAG for such a long time.
Right.
And my guess is, yeah, she felt like I don't want to be put in a position where I have to make that call myself, and I want to support the Guild as much as possible. But that's just me. That did not come from Kate. But I feel like she's someone who's always, she's so strong in her principles and beliefs that would fit to me if it's true.
It is possible that, yes, that all shows will be treated the same, whether it was produced this year or in 1987,
Right.
and if so, then Las Vegas is going to be different when it comes to those panels. But there's even some like weird nuance where you can talk about your acting process on the show, but not about your character. I mean, it's so like, are there going to be lawyers there? I mean, it's just dumb, I think, to like, they're just going to avoid anything and they're going to talk about their hobbies and their
Right, because
families.
it's too, like, they shouldn't have to be the ones who have to sit there worrying that they're going to accidentally say something and someone posts it on social and then the Guild finds out and says, well, that crosses the line.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
don't
It
want to
should,
be deciding live on stage what crosses lines and what doesn't.
yeah, which is why I say, just say any show shot before 2010, go for it, and hopefully
Sure.
we get
Hopefully
that kind of.
they'll let you make that call.
Put me in charge, coach. And I support the unions. I support the strike. I agree with all the promotion stuff, but I kind of feel for these actors some of whom have not worked in years. Let's face it. They're not making their SAG minimums to get health coverage, that kind of stuff. They need this work too. So,
Right.
all right. I think it's time for us to roll in our previously recorded review of an episode. Spoiler alert, we liked it.
Yep.
So it's time to communicate over Lost in Translation.
It is. And I have to say, I really enjoyed the episode this week.
Me too. I really enjoyed it. It was a great character episode for Uhura and some of the other characters. I liked that it's kind of spooky, but not too scary. It's just classic Star Trek storytelling. We're in space. It's not a planet, but it's a nebula. It's something, right? And,
Sure.
Finding new life. And, there's so many episodes this reminds me of, and we'll get into that more. But no, I very much enjoyed it.
I thought it was a great Uhura story, and I really liked her first season episode too. So I thought Celia did an amazing job, won me over emotionally completely. Loved getting Hammer back. Loved Pelia actually getting to do a lot more. And this was like, it was nice for me because, I get tripped up a lot when I watch this show with like, why is that happening? How did they do? And I didn't really have those this time. It all just kind of made sense. And I thought they did a really nice mix of like the science stuff and the story, the plot, with Uhura's personal story, where it was very logically intertwined. They didn't have to do tricks to make it happen. It all fit and it worked and resonated.
Yeah, I think Celia did a really good job because this was kind of her first big episode of the season. They did this kind of interesting thing where they sort of retconned the first 5 episodes, where basically she said, okay, well, actually, I've been a mess ever since Hemmer died in episode 9, which is 7 episodes ago, right?
Right.
But it made sense because people do that.
Yeah, people completely hide it. I had no trouble believing that at all.
And it tied into the death of her parents. And we learned more about that. And yeah, and it was clever how they brought Bruce Horak back. I still think they're going to bring him back as a non-Anar character, but they were able to bring the character back, which was great in a fun way.
Yeah.
Although I do wonder who was filming those videos. Like, is there floating?
But I always think that, like, I feel like so many shows do that, where they show this video and I'm like, who was there filming a big selfie stick? Floating selfie stick?
Right, because it was the camera was moving around.
Yeah.
And
don't they always do that, like, on view screens on Star Trek too? They pull out and you're like, oh, so now there's camera and a director making decisions. So
there are invisible floating cameras on starships, and we just have to accept that. I would like to see these floating cameras, though, because there should be drones and stuff like that, which actually Discovery finally started incorporating robots and stuff on the ship, which I thought was smart because these ships should be just swarming with robots.
Yeah, and the ones that cleaned up, I thought made a lot of sense.
Prodigy did that too, obviously. But no, her story was great, and you really, God, she just knocked it out of the park with the emotional stuff, and that you didn't really know, was she going crazy, was she not going crazy, so I'm really happy with the storyline, and they didn't drag it out too much to the point where people started figuring it out.
I thought the pacing was great, and the length of the episode was great too. It all worked. And I also like the stuff with number 1 and Pelia was so much fun. I really enjoyed the two of them going at it and having to realize what their problems are. And then at the end, like when Pelia really figured it out, I thought that was great. But she also had some great, like just Pelia's whole attitude was so good when she's like, aye, aye, and she's doing all this stuff and she's got crumbs on her, which I thought was really, really funny.
And Una called her a space hippie.
Yes, the space hippie. And she used the word malarkey, by the way, Pelia.
Yes. There was a lot of good dialogue between those two, and Una's got a good point. Pelia's only a commander and she's been in Starfleet for 100 years. I mean, that's...
What's up with that? She is sloppy. She must be sloppy. And when did she even eat? That was funny too.
Exactly. Okay, so we haven't talked about a very important character yet. So let's talk about the James T. Kirk in the room.
Here's my take on Kirk right now. I don't feel that he's Kirk, but I feel that he's somebody now. So, which I felt in his last one with La'an also. I was like, okay, well, he may not, to me, feel like Kirk. He has a little smattering of Kirk qualities, but so do I. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not feeling the Kirkness of it all, but I feel like he's a legit character that he finally has some kind of handle on. And I thought, even though I kept thinking, well, you have a moment of like, couldn't this have been a really good Pike and Uhura story and all that? And then I realized it kind of had to be an outsider because that's the only person that she would have connected with at that point. She did feel like she couldn't go to her people.
I thought it was all very organic. This is the first time he's played our Kirk, in theory, right? Because he's Lieutenant Kirk, destined to be Captain Kirk.
Right.
Not an alternate universe. If we don't count the little bit at the end of the time travel episode.
Right.
He was believably a lieutenant on the Farragut. He's more brash than normal. You could see his ambition. I loved the stuff with him and Sam. I have many brothers. All of that stuff was very real and genuine between the two of them. And there was a moment in the bar when Sam left where there was a look that Paul Wesley gave that was very Shatner-esque. I thought maybe it was just me, but there was one Shatner-esque moment, but he's not really trying to be Shatner-esque.
No, he's not. And I do appreciate that. I feel like he's got more pine in him than Shatner.
Probably. But it's a good character, and he was good in this episode, and he was great with Uhura. The key scene in this whole thing is the scene when she's admitting her fears of death and facing death, and he kind of rallies her and says that's part of the job. It's essentially a risk is our business version, but it's different. It's more personal. That's what we do in Starfleet. You've got to buck up. It's like, I'm not going to tell you a fairy tale.
Yeah, I liked that part that he said that. He also saved her life in this episode, which was good. When he grabs her and says, 2 to beam out, emergency beam out, or whatever it was, because things were about to go very south. I mean, I didn't love the brother stuff just because I was like, they're both kind of, and primarily Jim is being a jerk, primarily. And the whole needing daddy's approval, whatever, doesn't interest me so much. I mean, I have 3 brothers also, but I'm not one of them. I'm one of the sisters, and we're also not, whatever. Anyway, but it's the way you described it. I'm like, okay, that's fair enough. And we also, before we dig into things, Spock and Chapel had a little moment as well.
They are making good on the if stuff happens, it keeps on happening thing. So this episode did 2 things that were just kind of thrown in there. One was a check-in on the Spock and Chapel couple.
Yeah, just a quick check-in, just very fast.
But they were like, yeah, that's happening. And all, the key thing is they're not going to tell anyone about it.
Right.
But it was a cute little moment, and they wrapped it into the Uhura story. I kind of like how they kind of really weren't interested in what she had to say because they're too interested in themselves.
Right.
And then there was a quick check-in with La'an and Kirk, because we didn't really hear anything from La'an after the time travel episodes. We haven't had time to check in with how she's been dealing with that. But this is far more complicated because this isn't her Kirk. She's in love with a different Kirk. And if you think about that Kirk, there's nothing this Kirk and that Kirk have in common. That Kirk was born in space, totally different universe.
Yep.
His brother died. They're completely different guys. And she looks at this guy and feels for the other guy, but this guy's not that guy. So I thought, like, the first time she walked up, I mean, you could sense that she doesn't know what to do. But I'm curious if they're going to turn, if she's going to start a romance with this Kirk as well. I kind of hope they aren't, to be honest.
Yeah, it raises a lot of issues that I don't want to think about.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. Not only the canon issue of Khan. Oh, yeah.
Noonien Singh. I swear I've heard that name before.
I used to date your. Anyway. I just feel like in last episode, Chapel said, "I don't want human Spock. I want my Spock," and Lon wants her Kirk, who died.
Yeah.
From her perspective, this is a bad copy of that Kirk, even though he's a perfectly fine guy, as I was just saying, but.
He's sort of a better guy.
Yeah.
Frankly. Yeah.
But that's not the one she fell in love with. Why would she, torture herself to go through it again? So I hope this goes nowhere, even though Kirk being Kirk did remind her that he owes her a drink. Or she owes
him one. Yeah.
So I'm glad we did check-ins there so they didn't ignore, like when Lon sees Kirk, it's a thing.
It was the right balance. It was a check-in, but it wasn't the main part of the story. And I think they tried to, again, weave it in so it didn't feel like, oh, let's find a reason to do. It was like, oh, it makes sense. That's what they're doing.
And I think, it's so difficult, especially because of the tropes about Kirk. But I think they did a good job of making it clear that he really wasn't hitting on Uhura. And in fact, La'an made that point where he just can't help himself to want to help someone in trouble, that he saw her in trouble.
Right. And he said to her, I'm a great judge of character, and I believe you, and I can help. So, but they did, there was definitely a little nod to Star Trek 2009 when he met Uhura in that movie, and this was taking it in a different direction. because in that movie they meet at a bar. He does hit on her.
Yeah, for
She
sure.
ignores him and all of that because she's going to end up dating Spock. But
Right.
but in this, it was just friendship, and he got a sense that she was in trouble and needed help, and he gave it to her, and he listened to her. And when she socked him one, he was like, "Let's not report this."
So why does she keep a dermal regenerator in her quarters?
I don't know.
I mean, does
Maybe
everyone, or does she have other secrets, perhaps?
Yes, that was one of those things. I just had a twinge, and then I was like, "It's okay, it's fine." It got us to where we needed to go. I mean, she would have, if it wasn't Star Trek, she would have bandaged him up with something.
Of course, no, no, I'm kidding. That's not a real thing. And
No.
of course, I mean, I liked how last season, as a cadet, she had to stay in this like horrible bunk room with a bunch of guys.
Yeah.
Right. But now she's an ensign, huge quarters, of course, because everyone gets huge quarters.
Everyone has huge quarters.
Yeah.
Good for her.
I think it's because they only have one set and they use it for everyone. I think they just kind of move things around because they don't have her quarters and La'an's quarters and Una's quarters. And,
right.
I think they just kind of mess around with the same set.
Right. Pike has a special one and then everybody else has to share, which, they did that on Voyager. They do that on all the shows.
No, it's fine. It's just kind of funny how big it is. But, well, I mean, there was a moment, of course, when Kirk shows up on the Enterprise, he immediately just like gives it a look like,
oh, yeah. He's like, this is something.
I like this.
Yeah.
And there was, so the whole thing about Kirk wanting to beat his dad, George Kirk, who we met in Star Trek 2009, which I always remind people that was a in-canon scene up until.
Right. So in this, he's still alive.
Right. He didn't die then.
Right.
But that's the same guy. That's the same mom. Right. That's the same ship he was on, the USS Kelvin.
Very good-looking parents, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. But now he wants to beat his dad, or he is going to beat his dad to be the youngest first officer ever. And there was a bit at the end when Kirk and Sam are kind of making up, where you almost got a sense of Kirk's motivation, because Sam says to him, well, fine, you go back to the Farragut. I'm going to be here on the USS Enterprise. And maybe it's the brotherly competition in my head, but I immediately thought, oh, now Jim's thinking, okay, well, fine, then I'm going to be captain of the Enterprise. That's my next move. So did Sam's taunting inspire Kirk to want to get the ship?
I didn't feel that way, but I would also say, like, if it resonated with you because you have brothers and you picked up that extra thing because of it, that's totally valid and is probably in there.
So let's get back to the Hemmer stuff. I mean, how shocked were you when you saw Zombie Hemmer?
Zombie Hemmer was, I made a category in my notes called Other Fun Stuff, and it has two things in it, and one is Zombie Hemmer. Because I thought he was fun. I also, and just that it wasn't just Uhura, like that they showed that number one is also still bothered by his loss and his death, and that's the thing that bugs her. But Zombie Hammer was great. I bet he had a lot of fun doing that.
I mean, the first time you see him in the turbo lift, he's scary. Then later, he's just kind of hanging out on the bridge. Like, hey, I'm a zombie. How you guys doing? Zombie over here.
And then I'm all back.
Yeah, and then he's fine. But he was kind of a friendly zombie in the end, as it were. So
ultimately, well, because he just wanted some help. But I also loved when Pelia said, like, he was one of my best students. No, I'm just saying that because he's dead.
This is another one of those episodes where your Star Trek instincts really want you to know more about the sci-fi mystery. It's a refinery, and the communication visions were all because there's some alien race trying to communicate, and it hit Ramon and Uhura for some reason. And then it's all kind of sorted out really quickly where Uhura goes, oh, well, here's what they were saying. They're saying you're attacking us and it's your fault. And we live in the, and Sam's like, oh, they must live in the deuterium, or they live on or they are the deuterium. It was covered so quickly that, I just wanted Geordi or Data to stop, and I needed a little more there. but I got it. I got the, and I think that's what the show does is like, you get it, but I still want to know more, because the only communication they had, which makes it emotional, was that nod from Hemmer is normal again.
Right.
And he represented one of those aliens, and
smiled. Yeah.
but they never kind of really made contact. They never talked to them. So I'm unclear if they were genuinely sentient or if they were more. It's that was a little unclear to me. What do you think?
I thought they were. I just thought that they were a very different kind of being, that was the only way that they could communicate. Yeah. And I really loved the scene where they broke down the hallucinations, because hallucinations can be really boring. Like the way crazy people who are ranting in a movie or show can be very boring because it's not attached to anything. And so when you get to connect the dots and each hallucination is actually giving a different and useful piece of information, and then they sew them all together so nicely, I thought that was really, really well done. And it made sense that at that point she was able to piece it once she had the other pieces, it made perfect sense to me that she could put it together.
And it wasn't obvious what was going on. Like sometimes you could kind of guess what's going on, and we've seen some of these kinds of things before. I mean, there's been lots of episodes with hallucinations or visions or stuff like that in Star Trek. I'm thinking of, 7, when she was in 1, where she was hallucinating. They were in a nebula and there was the radiation, and
I was thinking of, I immediately thought of a very bad original series episode, The Lights of Zetar, because right. Mira Romaine, they are connecting because of they're through her brain, basically. And she sees that this has happened. Now she's seen it happen to all of Memory Alpha, right? But, right. Memory Alpha, they all die, but one of them makes those same sounds and has those superimposed colors on the face that she had. And so, and then even you can go to the Tholian web and go, look, there's Uhura. She sees Chekhov go crazy. She starts to what she thinks is hallucinate to do that. And then she's terrified. Am I going to go crazy like he is? Is that going to happen to me next?
There's a little bit of the Voyager episode where those people are communicating to the Doctor through his dreams.
Yeah.
And I mean, the most spot on episode here, which is not really about visions, it's the Next Gen episode, Force of Nature, because what we have here is another environmental episode. So that the episode, that's the core theme here, which is a recurring Star Trek theme, is an environmental theme of not harming the galaxy, and they were certainly doing that inadvertently, and Pike made it very clear, no matter how important this is to Starfleet, and they did mention the Gorn, this is very important, this particular location strategically, but they're not going to hurt some species to drill for deuterium, which is very similar to Force of Nature, where warp travel.
Yeah. And,
there's elements of the Malon and Voyager as well, that kind of thing.
For sure.
Star Trek has always had good environmental episodes. And of course, Star Trek 4. I thought that was a nice, very Star Trek theme for this.
I agree. I like the message of it. I did think it was weird that they kept using gas station as a reference, because I would hope that we would have changed some things in the future. It wouldn't be, it's not that nobody should have heard of those things, but sometimes, and this is
doesn't that ship have a tailpipe? I mean, come on.
It's not unique to Strange New Worlds to pull something that's so contemporary that you think by the time they're doing this, that won't be the contemporary reference. Like whatever, when I'm sure somewhere on Voyager, Janeway said something about making a long distance call or something like that. And you're like, what? That wouldn't be, usually when you do that, it's because it's something that's familiar to you. But again, it's happened a million times before.
We carry some stuff from the 20th and 19th century in our vernacular, so I'm fine with that kind of stuff.
I move past it quickly.
I did feel, I really liked, how this episode started, and, Pike's speech. It was a beautiful nebula, and it was, embracing the wonders of space travel and exploration, and Pike talking about how they're on the edge of the frontier. I thought that too was very classic Star Trek.
I appreciated that and felt the same way. And then, I think that those were two of the big themes, like the environmental theme and the exploration, but also the challenge of dealing with loss and grief. not just how you face death as a Starfleet officer, but how you deal with those things as a human being. Because it's such a deep, rich topic. I mean, to me, it's what the Deep Space Nine pilot is primarily about. And I love it for that reason. So I thought this delved into all those feelings and how complicated they are and how messy they are very, very well, and how we block things, but we have to accept them for both Una and Uhura, for sure.
It's interesting that if you think about production schedules and stuff, this episode was written well before season 1 ever showed up. So they did not know that Hemmer was going to be a breakout character. He was barely in season 1, if you really think about it. He showed up periodically, but he really had a huge impact and people loved him. So bringing him back this way showed that they got it, I guess.
Yep. And I bought that in between the episodes we saw, Uhura and Hemmer had more time together and did more things and got even closer. That seems that fit.
Yeah, as shown by their fun little
video shot by the drone. Yeah.
which are kind of remind me of, how often have you tried to figure out how to install something and you just pull up YouTube, and
right. No, totally. Like, I thought it made sense that she would have filmed him telling her those things. It was only the second time when she was in the video too. Because I thought the first video was her film. It felt like it was her filming him, which made more sense.
Yeah.
I do have a plot question. I was a bit confused. Maybe you have an answer.
Okay.
Why couldn't they shut down the refinery?
I only assume that there was, that Ramon's sabotage was there was something that they didn't find. And that once they turned it on, they couldn't turn it off. So they had to blow it up. Although my question then is, how did they know blowing it up was actually good?
Not worse?
Yeah, because wouldn't that ignite all the deuterium? I'm not
Yeah, I was a little bit like, or killing. I guess they're torturing them now. It's like killing them. I don't know. And then I was very confused about why. It just seemed if he was trying to sabotage it so it didn't work, it seemed like a weird side effect that now they couldn't shut it down. I would have appreciated a little technobabble about that.
Well, because there was some weird technobabble where they implied that these aliens actually came from another dimension. And my thought is, you know what? If you're from another dimension, this is our dimension. If you're poking into our dimension and you're getting, hurt on our deuterium, like, go find some other dimension. This is our dimension and our deuterium.
That's how I feel when a spider comes into my house. I'm like, you can exist just fine out there. I have nothing against you out there, but please don't come in here because things are not going to go well for you.
When Kirk mentioned that he was going to go talk to the chief medical officer of the Farragut, they could have done something cute with that and have him refer to that chief medical officer as Bones. But it was a woman, so it's obviously not.
Right.
McCoy.
Listen, they did their cute moment where they have a temporary reason that Pike is the fleet captain.
Oh, right.
That one line of dialogue, right? Like, there's that one line. Have you ever met Pike? Oh, I met him when he was promoted to fleet captain. So then, and Pike says he's temporarily promoted to fleet captain.
He had a special badge. I mean, that was such a weird, because let's say they did this whole episode and they didn't do that, right? I think they did that merely because they're like, you know what? We have to do this because of that one line of dialogue. Fine. But the Farragut has been assigned to this strategic location, which has been chosen because of its proximity to Gorn space. And Kirk was in Sam's lab and he was surrounded by Gorn skeletons, so the line of dialogue that Kirk barely knows who the Gorn are years later, which I guess Akiva's basically said, we're just going to ignore that. But this line of dialogue from the menagerie, we're going to make sure that we cover that one. So I'm glad they did it, but it is kind of funny when they choose to,
right.
We're going to do it this time. And I think that's because there's no way around the Gorn one. They just can't, they can't
have the Gorn. They can't do what they want to do with the Gorn and stick to what happened before. It doesn't work. So they have to make it up, which we've talked about endlessly, so I won't do it again. But it's the same thing as in the La'an episode when he says, nobody calls him Sam but me. And she goes, everybody calls him Sam.
Right. So
And I
no,
was like, that's smart and it's fun. And it works if you don't know what they're talking about. And it works if you do know what they're talking about.
yeah, no, it was clever, and it's really only the fans are going to go, oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Everyone else will just ignore it and wonder, why did he have a special badge for one episode? But
Yeah, why did he have to be fleet captain for 3 hours or however long it was?
right, because he was only like in charge of like 2 ships and a station, but whatever, that's it worked.
Yeah, I mean, fleet captain it was fine. It didn't bother me at all. In fact, it was like, I just felt, okay, thank you. Thank you for giving us that. Here's something else that was very classic Trek. Uhura fighting herself.
That's true.
That was, that to me, that's a great way to do a nod that's not a nod. Like, that's just, it had a reason. She explained the reason, and it still kind of fit into some good, like what we expect. Sooner or later, you're going to have to face your double, and you might have to fight them.
How many Star Trek characters have faced and or fought another version of themselves? It's
I think years ago I made a list for myself. Not just, it wasn't who has doubles, but it has who has doubles who had to meet their double.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, which was like Kirk and Kira, and just there are quite a few, I think. So the other thing that was in my fun stuff list, I can't believe I thought this was fun, but it was when Uhura goes, I don't need a cookie, and he says, and Kirk says, okay, now you sound crazy.
Yeah, that.
And then she didn't think that was funny, but we obviously did. Why wouldn't you want a cookie?
He brought her the cookie.
Yeah, because it was a real cookie. He wanted her to have a real cookie.
He was willing to split the last one, which was quite nice of him, I thought.
Yes, yeah, he's a good guy.
And yet she rejected the cookie, which is insane.
She was right. That's what he said. That's insane. That's crazy. What's wrong with you?
M'Benga doesn't come off well in this episode because he totally misdiagnosed her. She had a very good point. How could her visions have started before she was in the nacelle?
He also didn't offer her anything to help her sleep. I was like, not even a hot toddy? Nothing? Like, yeah. Beverly would have given her the hot toddy or something else. Something. But he didn't offer. It was Christine Chappell said, oh, I can give you something to help you sleep. Yeah. And people did. I did feel like maybe you shouldn't leave her alone. Like near the end when she was having these hallucinations. Okay, I'll find you later. I'm like, that's such a TV thing. Like, no, this person shouldn't be left alone. And there did seem to be a scarcity of security personnel out there to find Ramon.
This was another one of those episodes where we get to see horrible things happen to the ship. Like the bridge exploded and everyone pulled into space.
That looked great, by the way.
Yeah. But I did like the scene after that where Pike takes her aside and he says, he tries to have that difficult conversation about her as a friend and as her captain.
Was that the one in sickbay?
No. He pulls her into his office.
Oh, okay.
And then Kirk comes in and says, I figured it out. You're not crazy. The sabotage guy has the same visions.
Right.
Because his chief medical officer figured it out, who we never saw her, but she's the real hero of this episode. Right. She's the one who put the pieces together.
She should get the medal. That's who gets the medal.
Yeah.
I didn't know why they were bringing up medals anyway. I never thought of Kirk as someone who's like counting his medals or thinking about medals.
Yeah, when he said, I thought, is there a canon thing here? Are they referencing a particular medal or something? And I don't think...
That felt a little odd. But the Pike scene that I liked with Pike and Uhura, I believe it's in sickbay, where he comes and sits next to her. Like he's talking to her sort of from a distance, and then he comes in and sits down next to her, which is a great way of showing, like, I'm on your side, and I'm here for you.
Yeah.
And then he gets up again, because he's also still her captain. I thought the physicality of that worked very well with what he was saying.
So who was that? It's rare on this show for them to show a member of the Enterprise crew get killed.
Yeah.
It was a gold shirt, not a red shirt, because they didn't want to fall into that trope. We never met this person, so it was just a random crew person, I guess. But should they have, or is that a cliche, introduced us to that character earlier so we knew who they were when we saw them dead later?
No, because we would have known. That's almost never done well in anything. you meet someone, you can see like the cloud hanging over their head. And so I thought that was fine.
If someone comes in to talk to Captain Pike and say, "Oh, tomorrow's my last day."
Yeah. I'm retiring next week, or I just got married,
Yeah.
or I'm going to see someone I haven't seen. And, that's always the sign.
The smart thing to do is to introduce them that way in a previous episode.
Right.
And then they sneak it up on you, which these shows have done that kind of stuff before. That's I like it when they do that, when they redshirt someone over a couple episodes.
Yeah.
To be subtle about it.
Versus bringing Joe Carey back for one episode at the end of Voyager and then brutally killing him.
But I like when they kill people. And, Kirk is right. Space is dangerous. People die. You got to deal with that. You got to get, not hardened to it, but you got to work through it. And Pike mentioned it later. He's like, 2 people died. That's a big deal. They're not ignoring it.
I mean, he just mentioned someone died. I don't even think, did they give the character a name even?
No.
I don't think so.
I did like how the episode ended. It was on a light note, a little smooth jazz, but they gave us, it was a history making moment. Obviously we had the history making moment of Uhura meeting Kirk, but Spock meeting Kirk, it's such an epic friendship, and they showed them meeting and then sitting down with Uhura and the 3 of them just having a nice chat. And
about how annoying Kirk's brother is. That was a great and weird way for them to have their first conversation. And then they did a close-up of the handshake, and I felt like that was their way of saying this is a big moment without having to, have a band play. Well, there was a band playing, but you know what I mean? Without having all this fanfare and look, here it is, and everybody was just, here's the handshake, take a look. This is the moment.
I know for the actors, Celia talked about it in our interview about like how they all recognized the moment, the 3 of them together.
Yeah.
So I thought it was a nice little scene. So I feel like they are setting something up in this episode like they did in episode 1 for a coming Gorn thing, for sure.
Yeah, I just tried to pretend that I didn't hear them say that. I was enjoying myself, and I was like, why ruin a nice thing?
There's also, in the last episode, Pelia, there was an issue where they were running low on dilithium. I guess they're running low on deuterium.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if there's something there about, and that first episode was about mining dilithium. So I'm wondering if there's some bigger scarcity issues, and is that going to be what leads to the confrontation with the Gorn fighting over resources? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I don't know. I always just shut that stuff out because I don't want to think about them. I feel like that's the main. I didn't love the brotherly rivalry, but I know they needed to get Kirk on the Enterprise by himself. So they didn't have to explain like, oh, he's coming with some people, but they went somewhere else. So he comes to visit his brother. And then they needed Kirk to be left alone in the bar.
Yeah.
So, and I guess they didn't want to do Sam gets called away to do something. They wanted them to have some kind of fight so that he's in a mood.
Maybe.
That was my least favorite part. But the rest of it worked so beautifully. And I really was emotionally moved by this one and many times in the episode.
Absolutely. Mostly the Uhura scenes. It really got to me when you see real Hemmer, non-zombified Hemmer.
Yes, me too.
And
I miss him.
Yeah, just a look, and he doesn't say anything, but he conveys so much. This show is really good at playing to the emotions, I think, at times. And that was really great, I thought.
And I think a lot of that is Celia really doing such a beautiful job of someone who's trying to fight emotions. She's trying to fight this stuff from coming to the surface, and it does. And then we see that parallel in Una, where she'll go to great lengths. She's making up that it's some C that she got on a paper that is making her upset when she's actually upset because her friend died and this is the person who's replacing them. And I love that Pelia is like, we can keep pretending it's the C. I also really liked that Number One and Spock are both troubled by crumbs. Like last week, Spock was really bothered by the crumbs. And this week it was number one's turn. I mean, I feel like half the time I'm the person with the crumbs, and the other half of the time I'm annoyed by the person with the crumbs. So I relate it.
Shouldn't their like high-tech sci-fi outfits like automatically do something with those? Oh, but by the way, this is a nitpick. I'm gonna call back a nitpick for the time travel episode. It really bothered me that they just threw away their uniforms in Toronto.
Yes. That they didn't destroy, that they left them where somebody could potentially find them.
Who knows what they're made out of, but they're not made out of, what the actual costumes are made out of. It's some 23rd century miracle fabric that you don't put in a garbage can.
And that is clearly not just a fashion thing. Like, two of them, different colors. They look like uniforms.
Ed Begley Jr. showed us you just can't leave stuff like that lying around.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry. Like randomly going after an episode we reviewed weeks ago, but whatever.
Sure, I remember noticing that at the time myself, so good one. Is there anything else that we need to...
I think going after other episodes means I think we're done praising this one.
Yeah, this was my favorite episode of the season.
I agree. I'm now even more looking forward to next week. Of course, next week is the big one, Lower Decks crossover.
The crossover, that's why we don't have it yet.
Exactly. We haven't seen it, but we can't wait.
I know, that's the one I'm the most excited about. A straight up comedy, so get ready.
Yeah.
Which is, this one was pretty heavy, even with the space hippie comment.
But there were some lighter moments with this one. It had it all. It had some sci-fi, it had some humor, it had some horror, great character development, And
it fit together. That, to me, is the key. It all fit together. I didn't feel like, we got to jump through hoops so that we can make this part make sense. It all just fit.
Exactly.
All right, so that was our review of Lost in Translation, and now we'll wrap things up with our bits of the week. Tony, why don't you start?
I hadn't heard of this before, but there's just this little motel in North Bend, Oregon called the Itty Bitty Inn. And they have a Star Trek themed room, and I saw pictures of it on Facebook and then went to their site, and it's just adorable. And you could just stay in this cute little inn, and the room looks original series, and they have props, and they have old Star Trek records there, and it's just adorable and cute.
I want to stay there.
Talk to family and do a trip to Oregon. Oregon's beautiful.
I don't see that on the horizon anytime soon, but you never know. All right, well, for mine this week, I want to direct people to a video that is on YouTube where you can watch it from the Nichelle Nichols Foundation, which is an organization that's actually continuing Nichelle Nichols' legacy of getting women and people of color into, STEM fields, as they say, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. One of their big projects is sending young women to space camp, which is pretty cool. So they've had a series of really great talks. One of them was like Larry Nemeczek and Walter Koenig, and they've had a bunch of different ones. The one I want to tell you about was with our own Dr. Kayla Iacovino, Tim Russ, and a planetary scientist, Dr. Michael Wong, talking with Nichelle's sister, Marion Smothers, about astronomy and how to seek out strange new worlds. And it was, Tim Russ is an amateur astronomer, but he's been doing it for many, many years. And they have a really great conversation. So it's very science-y, but has a little philosophy in there. And I think people will really enjoy it.
It's great that they are carrying on Nichelle's name and her legacy that way.
Yeah, that was a mission of hers that was really important and very impactful. So that's it for the week, folks. We'll see you next week with another episode of All Access Star Trek.
Goodbye.